I really am never sure about people clapping at this end of the presentation, because the material's actually not that good. But no, that's the best joke. You've got 15 or 20 minutes of me yet. Something I've been thinking about a lot, about this thing about networking skills being for life, not just for breakfast, and ended up writing this down, because I'm working with a lot of people who are struggling to make sales. They're struggling to make sales not just in networking, but in every aspect of their business. And it started me thinking that an awful lot of what we need to do at networking is really quite similar to what we need to do if we want our businesses to thrive generally. This is a brand new 4Sight, by the way. As some of you know, I haven't 4Sighted for 2 months. This is pretty much my first one since I saw some of you at Lincoln a couple of months ago, and brand new material, so I'm going to refer to my notes, because I wrote it last night. So what do we... True. So what do we need to do in our business a lot of the time? We need to get out there and prospect and look for business. If we don't do that, if we just sit at home, as Brad Burton says, aggressively waiting for the phone to ring, we usually get a rude wake-up call when we've been in business for a couple of months, because people don't tend to phone us. There's a very, very crowded market out there. People have got pretty much unlimited choice of which services they buy. So we need to get out there and prospect, which is actually what most of us are doing now. For all of the other benefits that we get out of networking, for all of the other benefits that we learn to get out of networking, the support, the friendship, the business advice that we get, actually the reason that most of us start, and please correct me if I'm wrong, start going networking is that we come out here because we want to sell our stuff to the other people, either in the room or through the room. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So prospecting, actually being out at networking events, that's something we need to do. We need to engage with people. And actually engaging in 2015 is possibly a little bit more complicated than it used to be, because we've got all of the options to engage with people with, as well as real life, as well as the telephone. We've also got LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Google+, lol, and Periscope and all of the other things that we're doing. And so engaging is something that we really have to do. And learning how to engage people at networking events and how to continue to engage those people is terribly important to us. What were the other bits, Steph? That was it. Follow up. How could I forget? There is a statistic somewhere that 87% of people never follow up after networking events. Spend all of this time coming along to networking events, but never follow up with the people afterwards. But following up isn't just about following up, and I'll talk about that in a second. A lot of people get their following up wrong. And then we get to the bits where I think people get a bit scared, because you need to propose your business to other people. If you want to do business with someone, there comes a point where you actually do have to talk about business, where you do have to start telling people what you do, what you charge, that sort of thing. There's a whole load of people who get a bit shaky when they talk about what they charge, and then you have to close the business as well. You do actually have to say to someone at some point, so would you like to buy from me, or words to that effect. And all of that you have to do in networking, and all of that I've worked with a load of people on quite recently and helped them to get better at it. But I think people pigeonhole me, and they pigeonhole networking skills as something that just applies to those weird people who go out and eat breakfast once a fortnight, or 3 times a week, or whatever it happens to be. But actually these skills are stuff that you need to get in business. And there's no better an environment, I found, to learn, practice, perfect these skills than in the very supportive environment of networking events. That's one of the things that I loved about it. That actually, when I used to stand up and do my 40 seconds when I first started coming to networking events, I was incredibly nervous, because this isn't what I naturally do. Standing up in front of groups of people and presenting isn't what I'm naturally comfortable with. But I learned to get better at it, and actually no one laughed at me. No one ever told me, you're being stupid, sit down. And that was one of the things I loved about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those points when I remember. Yes, and all of the ways that we can get better at those and use networking and use those skills in the rest of our business life as well. When I was an estate agent, which I was for about 20 years, we're doing all right, actually. Better result than I got a few weeks ago. But I was an estate agent for about 20 years, and we used to advertise in the Oxford Times every single week for those 20 years. And the point of that advert in the Oxford Times, bearing in mind I started in estate agency in 1988, so an awful lot of my agency career was pre-internet. We used to advertise in the Oxford Times every single week because we wanted to start a conversation with our constituents. We wanted to start a conversation with the people of Witney and West Oxfordshire. That's where my accent is from, that's where I drove up from last night. The point of the advert in the paper was to get people talking to us. The point of the advert in the paper wasn't to tell people about everything that we did and put every single house that we had for sale in there. The point of the advert in the paper was to get people phoning us or coming into our offices pre-internet. The point of networking events, I contend, is exactly the same. You're intending to start the conversation with people. When people stand up and do their 40 seconds, they very often think that the point of the 40 seconds is to tell people everything that they do, to get everything out there that they do, how long we've been established, etc., 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 what the special offers are this month. And actually, if people are listening to that, one of the things that they can do is sit and think, yeah, tick, I know what he does now, so I don't need to ask him for a one-to-one, I don't need to take that conversation further. When I need that service, I'll know what that guy does. The point of your 40 seconds at networking and the point of more about you, we're periscoping this live. I just got a face from Sheena.
Terry's trying to call you in the middle of your thing.
Terry Cooper?
Yeah, you should know better.
That I might be at a networking event at 9:05 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that I do know is that Terry Cooper doesn't do social media, so he won't know that. It will still work. Where was I going with that? So the networking event is the start of the conversation. The 40 seconds is your opportunity to engage so that people want to find out more about you. In any other marketing material which you put together, you'd likely think in terms of benefits, not features. When you're putting together your 40 seconds, try to apply the so what test. We do this, so what? What does that mean to the punter? Think about it in terms of what they're buying rather than what you're selling. It's very easy to get the two things confused, but actually what people are buying might be very different to what you actually sell. Free accounting. Now all of a sudden my ears are pricked up, because that's interesting to me, because that's something that currently costs me money and I pay tax and stuff as well. So all of that's suddenly interesting to me. That might be what I'm buying. I bet there's an awful lot about what Barry does that he didn't tell us in 40 seconds, but actually not a lot of that matters, because now I'm interested to have a conversation with him and find out more about it. Think about it in terms of what the people are buying. Think about benefits, not features. Couple of tips for your 40 seconds. I always stand away from the chair. There's a real tendency when you do your 40 seconds, particularly if you're a bit nervous about it, to do that and lean on the chair. And it's really counterintuitive, because you feel like you've got a barrier, you feel like it's going to make you feel more confident, but actually you feel worse than if you learn to stand and feel a bit confident here. And make notes. If you're worried about what you're going to say or you want to try a new 40 seconds, even in that 40 seconds, there's plenty of opportunity to forget where you're going. So if you need it, make notes. One of the best, or one of the tips that gets most picked up from the book, 106,000 words, and people pick up on about 20 words in a picture, is that every one of the devices that you carry around all day, your phones, have got a voice recorder on them. If you're at all unsure about what you're going to say, think about recording it into the voice recorder and listening to it back. There's a couple of things that will do. A, it makes sure that it's your words, because we write in subtly different language than we speak. It also makes sure that it's timed at around 40 seconds or 60 seconds. Other networking events do exist. But when you write, you've no idea how long it's going to take to read out. So think about recording it and listening to it back and timing it. Use your 40 seconds in a 4Networking environment specifically, because I'm here. Think about using your 40 seconds to encourage people to one-to-one with you. Give people enough that they want to find out more. When you've done that, when you've delivered a killer 40 seconds and you've got people queuing up for a one-to-one with you, now's your opportunity, isn't it, to tell people about everything that you do, to really sell to them, to get the credit card machine out and try and sell to them. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many people think that once they've ensnared you, now it's time to turn on the sell. Use your one-to-ones just as you would use in a sales environment, any sort of prospecting call. Find out about the other person. It could be really arrogant to try and sell to someone before you know anything about their business, because how do you know that they need the product or service that you supply until you know a little bit more about them? In 20 years of estate agency, an awful lot of what we did when we sat in people's houses was asking people questions about why they wanted to move, where they were going to. Use your one-to-one to find out more about the other guy. There's a book which I read a lot of and I talk a lot about called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If you've not read it, published in 1937, it's a book that I believe everyone in business should read. Dale Carnegie talks about the fact that you should aim to be interested rather than interesting. Be interested in the other guy before you try to be interesting yourself. Ask the other guy stuff and find out about what they're interested in. When I started in a estate agency, we used to write stuff on pieces of card. We used to write a load of information about the sort of house that the people were looking for, their contact details, the price range they were looking in, their address, their telephone number. In 1988, people used to have one telephone number per family, and the phone itself used to stay there at the bottom of the stairs, if you were in my family. That joke's better in my head than it is when I say it out loud, or it's a tough crowd, can't tell. But we used to write this stuff, and then on the back of the piece of card, we used to write the other stuff that we used to find out about people. Where they worked, because if they worked in Oxford, they probably wanted to live at a different end of Whitney to the people who didn't. What age their kids were, whether they needed the primary schools or the secondary schools in town, religion if it came up, because that would tell us which end of town they wanted to be as well, that sort of thing. But we were trained to ask the questions that would get people to open up about themselves. And in your one-to-one, you've got plenty of opportunity to chat to people. And sometimes people say to me, the thing about networking is that it's too social. This social stuff, this personal stuff, these bits and pieces of interest, I've never played golf, neither's Paul. Funny the things that I remember, or you have but you're no good at it, I can't remember which one it was. These things, these little social bits of glue, are the things which hold the rest of the relationship together. Those little things that come up in the conversation that aren't business related are exactly the things that help you to open up the conversation in future. Once again, when I was in a estate agency, we would talk to ask these questions, and then when we spoke to the other guy, we would have some point of commonality, we'd have something in common with them. It doesn't take long, once you're talking to someone, before you find something in common with the other person. We've all got something in common. Gary knows Oxfordshire, and he knows exactly where I live. That's the sort of thing that I remember along the way. So have those conversations with people, but when you're in one-to-ones, think about finding out more about the other person rather than just broadcasting about yourself. You've got a huge opportunity after networking meetings, and the fantastic thing is that, as I said earlier on, 87% of people never ever follow up after networking meetings. So if you just follow up with the people that you've met, you'll be a massive step ahead. How many times have you had a conversation with someone and you were interested in what they were selling, but you actually never hear from them again? I went to the business startup show in London in 2007. Exhibitor stands at the business startup show are about £3,000, and I talked to a guy about a special type of business card that he was selling, and I was really interested in buying it. And if he ever gets round to following me up, I said, I'm really interested, give me a call after the event. If he ever phones me, I'll probably still be interested in buying it, or I might not be now. 87% of people, or so I'm told, never make that follow-up call. But following up isn't just about following up. There's someone who's put on the 4Networking forum recently that every time I have a one-to-one with someone, I've taken your advice, I always send them an email explaining what I do, and no one ever gets back to me. A number of things happen to you when you leave this event. You'll have a missed call from Terry Cooper. You'll have a text that you've got to deal with. You've got emails that you've got to deal with. You're starting to run late for another client. The traffic's worse than you expected. All of these little conversations that you had this morning will start to go out of your head. Don't put a different set of rules on everyone else in the room. Everyone else in the room will do exactly the same. Those little conversations that you had with them will start to go out of their head. It's your responsibility, if you're in business, to keep reminding people about what you do. Following up isn't just about sending people an email or even putting in a phone call, although that's better, and saying this is what we do, buy from me. You've got so many opportunities now to keep gently in touch with people. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, LOL, Periscope, email marketing, blogging. And the great thing about that, the opportunity is massive and most people won't bother. Most people won't bother to do it. I spend time every day making sure I look at what other people have published on LinkedIn and either like it or comment on it. Looking on the 4Networking forum and looking what other people have written and liking it or commenting on it. I spend a lot of time daily looking at what other people have done and making sure that I show an interest in what they're doing. The biggest opportunity thus far that I've had through networking came a little bit earlier on this year, about 6 weeks ago, I think, maybe shorter than that, when I spoke at the annual conference for the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. That came from a conversation that I had with a 4Networking member 6 years ago. A lot of this follow-up might take time. You never know the opportunities that are just around the corner. And if you're not following up with people, if it's directly, actively following up with them by calling them, speaking to them, being at the same networking event as them, or by indirectly following up with people, by blogging, by putting content out there, by putting stuff out on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Google Plus and Instagram and Periscope, if you're not doing it, then there are other people in your industry or profession, trust me, who are. There are other people who are regularly turning up to the networking events. There are other social media people for sure in 4Networking, but I turn up here and I know Naomi's going to be here and going to be here regularly, so I know there must be something about her business because she's keeping going and she's always there. That sort of thing's important. When you follow up, if you're interested in doing business with the other person, then for God's sake, make it easy for them. Is your hand going to sleep, or are you winding me up?
It's fine, I've lost all feeling in my
Fine.
right arm.
It does that to you, I know. I've tried it. I'll only be a few more minutes anyway. When you are following up with people, do make it easy for them to buy from you. I go to networking events all over the place. I'm 150 miles from home right now. I had someone follow me up quite recently by email, said, I think you'd be really interested in what we do. So the next time you're here, a long way from my house, the next time you're here, let me know and we'll have a meeting. It's quite a big ticket sale as well. I would have thought, actually, if he was that confident that what he was selling would really be of interest to me, then maybe meet me halfway, or suggest being at a networking meeting that I'm going to be at. Make it easy for people to buy from you. Don't put a load of obstacles in the way, but keep following up with people. Return on investment is something that I think people measure wrong, not just in networking, but in social media as well. People think very hard about what did they get out of that meeting, what happened at that meeting, what did they sell. And very often I was talking to a group of lawyers recently, and an issue for them is that the business owners tend to send their staff networking, and then the very first question they ask their staff when they come back from networking, did you get any instructions today? Did you make any sales today? And they measure their return on investment based on one engagement, one meeting, one social media engagement. A lot of this is a longer game. Your return on investment, what you're doing when you're out networking is building an audience. We used to talk about building a list, how big was your mailing list, so on and so forth. A lot of the time now you don't actually know who's actively following you, who's actively paying attention to what you do. Some people are good enough to comment on your stuff, some people are good enough to post on your LinkedIn or your Facebook wall, but other people are just watching you. Be out there and look at your return on investment, not just in terms of how your audience is growing, but also how engaged that audience is becoming. One of the things that I look at all the time is which people are moving closer to me. If I've met someone at a networking event, and then I know that they're reading my blogs and I know that they're commenting on them, that's really interesting. That person's spending a load of their precious time commenting on my stuff, reading my stuff. That's the sort of person that really, really does deserve a phone call and to see how they're getting on and so on. And that's also the sort of person who may well buy from you in future. These people are moving closer to you all the time. It's not difficult to spot, but it does take a bit of effort to go out there and see what's going on, see what's happening in your network, see which people are moving closer to you. There was something I wrote down there and I keep forgetting it. That's it. This whole thing about selling to the room and selling through the room. Because what I'm talking a lot about this morning, quite specifically about how we sell to the room, about how you get people interested in what you're doing, because that's a lot of what we're here for, which is also a lot about not talking about what you do, about talking about what the other guy does. But selling through the room is a really interesting one. Garnering referrals from something like 4Networking has been really interesting to me. A very simple starting point is to start to think about what you do in sound bites. Little boxes that people can easily take away with them. So that once, accounting for free, that's stuck in my head now, so that if someone's at the school gates, if someone's at another networking event, if someone's down the pub and they come across someone who might need your services, all of a sudden there's something that sticks in their head about what you did that they can easily pass on to people. I had a reputation for getting the best price for probate houses. That was the type of houses which I sold, houses that had been left in an estate when someone had died. There were an awful lot of ways I achieved that, but I just made sure that people knew that out of all of the estate agents in Witney, I was the one who achieved the higher price for their properties. As long as someone knew that, if someone was at the school gate and an auntie had died or something like that, oh, I was talking to this guy this morning and maybe you'd better talk to him. What I did was of interest. How I did it was really of no interest to them at all at that stage, but it started the conversation. Think about transferable sound bites, stuff that people, and if Ian Dixon's watching, I know I just said stuff that people, apparently it devalues everything that I do, stuff that people can take away and easily pass it on to other people. Think about packaging your business in a form of words which is really easy for people to understand. And really finally, never underestimate the other people in the room. It's a slightly different story to the one I've used for the last 5 or 6 years, but you know, I knew this guy called Mike Freddie Gordon for 6, maybe 7 years now. Mike and I had this ongoing discussion. We got on very well together. He's a golfer, I'm not a golfer. He's a forensic accountant. Mike Freddie Gordon, he puts the F in forensic accounting. I remember all of that about him, but actually, him and I had never ever actually done any business together. There'd never been anything there. But we kept in touch, we kept gently in touch. And then towards the end of last year, he said, I've got a hand in organising this conference. I've seen you speak a few times and maybe I'll put your name forward for that. Would that be okay? Never underestimate the other people in the room. You never know who they might have been in a previous life, who they might be connected to right now, or who they might go on to become in the future. We very often, or there's a tendency, to judge people based on their badge, based on something that we think about them. But in networking, and in social media as well, you never know who's behind the person you're talking to, who's surrounding the person you're talking to. There was one person this morning who was worried about their 40 seconds and whether it read properly and that sort of thing. I've done, and this is why I get quite excited when people accuse me of being in the right place at the right time, I've done something over 750 4Networking meetings since I joined, which was at the end of 2007. So being in the right place at the right time is something I have engineered. I started using Twitter in the middle of 2008, started using all social media, LinkedIn and so on, even Periscope now, to make sure that I'm engaging with any audience as best I can. Being in the right place at the right time is something that you can engineer, and actually the opportunity is that most people won't bother. But as someone who used to completely fluff my 40 seconds, one of the things that I most fell in love with about this environment is that in any other sales environment I've ever been, you get told that you just get one chance to make a first impression, but networking was the only place I've ever been where I got a second chance or even a 750th chance to make an impression. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thanks for that stuff, that was brilliant.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. So
Go ahead.
I know there's probably a few questions.